Let's hope this works. Check, check, check. 1, 3. Can you all hear me? Also, I need to find where chat is. I can actually read all your wonderful messages in case there are any. Wonderful. Connor, great you can hear me again. And thanks for, well, not allowing me to burn down the dungeon today. Hey, Joe. Great to see you here. Thanks. Well, before we start, I guess I need to thank President Lukashenko for convincing the hot dog guy to stop the invasion of Russia so we can actually talk about King Arthur and not politics, which I guess is a good thing. So let's have a beer, shall we? Cheers. Hey, Oso, great to see you. Hey, Jeroen. Hey, Kadja. That's already a lot of people. I wasn't expecting anyone because, you know, it's super warm out there, and I thought like everyone had better things to do or joined the Feast for Crows guy, live stream that's still going on the other side over there on Scott's channel that I just saw. Hey, Ori, how are you doing? The hot dog guy stopped invading Russia because I don't know. President Lukashenko talked to Prigozhin, and then now Wagner is going back to their former positions, and everyone is happy again, or not. Don't ask me for details. I don't run any form of military secret services or anything of the sorts. I have no idea, but that's what I found out like half an hour before we started here. So I guess everyone's happy again, and because there are no high buildings left in Bakhmut, there's no chance of Prigozhin actually falling out of a window. So I guess he felt safe. Oh right, Kanye, you still have like a few pages left in Dust of Dreams. Well, there's people here that have probably read the entire series, so you have an emotional support group in case even more tragic things happen on the last couple of pages. Yeah, that sums it up fairly well. Or it's like a lot of murderous guys, basically circle jerking, which is. No, I would not admit to having a secret paramilitary force. It would be nice, though, right? Yeah, John, you're right. It definitely works out. Maybe he'll go back to selling hot dogs. That might just also work out. Well, I have no idea how close to the end you are, Kadia. So I have no idea what terrible things may still happen. I mean, we're still talking Dust of Dreams, and that goes terrible all the way to the end, almost. So yeah, let's start and talk about fun things, I guess, or not so fun things. And yeah, I hope those of you who actually watched the way too long King Arthur video had fun with it. And yeah, thanks for actually doing that and watching it. It took me a long time to get through all of that, but I was fairly happy with the results. No, the Dust of Dreams is not pixie dust. I'm pretty sure it's not even angel dust. I have no idea what it is, though. 8 pages left. That sounds like you might almost be safe. Almost, I think. Yeah, and I was like, once I did finish that video, it was super fun for me to realize like how much more I could talk about with Arthur now. And I'm like, but I don't want it anymore. It's like it will be a while before I touch anything author related in any form ever again. You're 2/3 through it also. Yeah, so you're probably somewhere around the Once and Future King part, I guess. I'm glad you I'm really glad you loved it, Joe. That means a lot to me. Oh yeah, I'm pretty sure you will love the Mark Twain book. It's brilliant. It has so much fun stuff in it. It has some dark sides in it. The fact that a famous abolitionist Mark Twain obviously will not say anything about black folks in his book, but is still racist. So anytime he needs to call someone primitive, he always compares them to several like Native American tribes. Whenever he comes up to that, is kind of dark, but it's interesting to see that the racist impulse is not gone just because you decide to accept black folks as normal human beings in a way. His progressiveness is very primitive. I mean, it's a very specific form of progressivism. And what is interesting when you look at Mark Twain, for example, and over time, Mark Twain became more and more radical. And there's like letters where he talks about his thoughts about the French Revolution and decided that like he starts out fairly mild as a sympathizer and ends up being like, yeah, I'm full on out there, just like Marat, only more so. And I'm like, all right. Talk about like radicalization of people there. So that was very interesting for me to see. And there's like, there's a cartoon in the original version that very much explicitly compares Queen Victoria with a pig. So they didn't pull any punches over there in the 1890s. But it's so funny because I find it so interesting because I always had this image of the Connecticut Yankee King Arthur's Court in my mind, and was it's this fun time travel story, and then he goes back and he knows all this technology, and yeah, that's there, and it's in there, but all the darkness just never comes out in most of the adaptations, and it's a similar thing with like when you're like Don Quixote is a similar one where everyone knows the tilting at windmills and like one or two other elements from the first part of Don Quixote. No one realized that it's a very complicated and very critical book, also with King Arthur references. Because none of those more complicated or more critical thoughts have made it through any of the adaptations, and now there's this like public image, almost like a very like well-established image, almost idea of what this story is that is so far removed from the original that you cannot even call it adaptation. It's almost like its own story. Like modern Don Quixote is very different from anything that's in that book. Oh, one thing that I found super fascinating, I wanted to check this up, but I haven't, is that in the Connecticut Yankee, the Yankee, Hank Morgan, does frighten away a bunch of knights by smoking a pipe and using the pipe smoke and blowing it out, and they think you can breathe fire and so forth. And the exact same scene happens in Three Hearts and Three Lions by Poul Anderson. And I was wondering how much of this idea was just Anderson paying homage to Mark Twain, because so much of Three Hearts and Three Lions is playing with ideas of fantasy stories and so forth. So I wasn't sure if there's like a deliberate thing or two people just came up with the same idea, although I'm pretty sure Anderson read Mark Twain. I mean, the basic story is a similar, and you have like an engineer, and then he gets knocked out, knocked on the head, and suddenly he's in weird fantasy land or past or the past somewhere. That being said, it is a very fun and great book to read. Three Hearts and Three Lions. That is. Also to blame for all dwarves ever since having had Scottish accents, I assume. Yeah, Jeroen. Yeah, I think it's. I just reread Three Hearts and Three Lions a couple of months ago, so it was fairly fresh in my mind. So when I read the Mark Twain one, I'm like, whoa, wait, was this deliberate? Yeah, well, I don't speak Spanish, so I can't talk about that anniversary edition that you're talking about, Niflrog. Sadly, but yeah, it's as I like. There's a bunch of these like stories that have almost. I don't necessarily want to call them classics because classics is such a weird title, but there are some stories that have where the story and the actual text have diverged so massively. When you, yeah, maybe Moby Dick is another one of those where everyone has the basic story somewhere in their mind, more or less. Although I'm not sure how many people, if you just go on the street and ask people, it's like, you know about Moby Dick, and people go yes. It's like, so how does it end? How many people would actually say, well, it ends with everyone dying because except the narrator, and I wonder how many people are aware of the fact that it does not have any form of happy ending. Okay. Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I feel like there's some of these classics that need that kind of like very annotated editions. What's his name? Dante, Divine Comedy is another one that if you don't have like an annotated edition nowadays, and you are not by happy chance already an expert on 14th century Italian politics, you're a bit lost with all of that. And it may be fun when you're going through all the different tortures because you maybe you just like tortures, but if you're if you're not into tortures, then it's already weird. And if you're into tortures, then well, Paradise will certainly bore you. Is I can tell you that. I mean, the other part is like, especially with something like Dante, and possibly also with Don Quixote, is like if you spend so much time reading the analysis and the annotations and explanations and so forth, can you at that point actually enjoy the prose and, or not, well, not prose with Dante because it's obviously a poem, but can you still enjoy the language, like the sheer power of the language? Like every second word, you need to actually look up what it means and why it is there. Which, yeah, I wonder that. Hey, biggest, how's the Blur concert? Started yet? Hey, Britton, how are you doing, man? Oh yeah, yeah, Jeroen, you're definitely right. It's the same with Rabelais, and there's a bunch of these authors. Like I mean, Chaucer is another one. I feel possibly you can get away with reading the Decameron. Boccaccio does work even when you know nothing about the context, but I'm not quite sure if it's the same with Chaucer. I feel Chaucer does already suffer from a lack of explanation. So yeah, it was just so interesting because there's so much more I could do with author this, where I'm like, I'm moving into territory that goes even beyond the video and like even more specific academic ideas, like the way the whole like the character of Guinevere, for example, and how she is portrayed both in classic in like the different Arthurian romances and history and so forth, and how that changes in, or doesn't change in a lot of ways in more modern Arthurian retellings. There's so many aspects you can tease out even more about that is just showed me once again like how powerful stories or like legends can be, because there's just so much that you can look at, and it's very dangerous for me because I can always just get stuck in one of those like weird tar pits of story or aspect of story, and then I'm like, yeah, what am I gonna do? What am I gonna do? Just talk about King Arthur the rest of my life? I hope not. I have not watched that Merlin TV show. I I know someone who really, really loved it, which may have tainted my perception of it. But I'm not sure if I'm a scholar, Nif, but I'm certainly I certainly like finding out stuff and then rambling about it for hours and hours. But then there's a very thin line between between being just a nerd and being a scholar. Yeah, there wasn't like a lot of fantasy around when that Merlin show came out, right? That was like, was that the late 90s, early 2000s? We didn't have anything back then. We had to dig our way through meters and meters of snow to every single fucking Game of Thrones episode. We couldn't even binge them back then. Those were terrible days. And now they're just canceling all those new TV fantasy shows. I just watched the quick video that Erudite Adventure put out on the state of fantasy media, and how the Thorian guy, whose name Richard Armitage, said that he doesn't want to watch Rings of Power because all of fantasy is so thin and no one cares about it anymore, and how all these new fantasy shows get canceled, and yeah, well. Well, I don't know if I'm a scholar and a gentleman also. I'm pretty sure that at least 50% of this statement are wrong. Anyway, where was I going? Yes, the whole like the state of fantasy media. Like, look, all of it are remakes or adaptations, and it won't stop. Even when people go like, yeah, but maybe we should stop remaking more like Tolkien stuff and adapt more newer and fresher stuff. Like, you're still adapting books. You're still doing the culture industry thing. You're not doing anything interesting with the medium of television where you could do your own thing. And so, yeah, it's just a capitalism thing at this point. Of course, you won't get like really cool fantasy shows because no one's going to risk that. Hallmark, yeah, I don't know. It was back in the day when people actually bought DVDs. Can you imagine how far we've come in like 20 years? People were still buying DVDs like box sets or Blu-ray, like no, not even 20 years, like 15 years ago. And now I'm not even sure if that stuff does still exist. Can you still buy DVD box sets? I haven't checked in ages. No, Joe. I'm pretty sure yours will be glorious. I can't wait for like a Rohan series. Would you go for like animated, or would you go for like people playing and whatnot? Live action is the word that I was looking for. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, Nif. It's like you can do great things with fantasy. on television, if you just write your own television show and don't have to adhere to any, pre-existing fandom wanting exactly that one thing and having that stuff before, just take advantage of what the medium of television or whatever you want, what that medium can actually provide that, say, books can't, and go with that. Yeah, making mediocre fantasy is really easy at this point. I think that's partly what's behind the whole, like, now everyone on Fantasy BookTube also going onto the whole, like, AI, chat GPT, weirdness stuff, is the fear that deep in our heart we're like, well, maybe most of the fantasy we're reading or writing would not be distinguishable from actually someone knowing how to use ChatGPT and writing the thing and editing the thing properly. Because maybe most of the stuff that we're actually consuming is fairly mediocre. And maybe we are replaceable. Oh, so you mean Gandalf Shrimp Lord? Yeah, I can see that working really well for, like, Wistful Ascending or anything of the sort, because you have all the space station with all the different aliens, and you have everyone in, like, either weird costumes or whatever, and they can do dance numbers somewhere in the space station. I can see that work out really well. I just don't know how the economics for that kind of thing are. Well, I've heard that works really well, Ori. That replacing horses with coconuts is a good idea. It's people will write academic papers on that, and I'm not joking. I've read parts of, adaptations of Arthurian myth, where people spend paragraphs talking about just the decision in Monty Python, the Holy Grail, of exchanging horses with coconuts. Zack Snyder's Wistful Ascending. Well, I mean, Rohan can sure punch people real hard if he wants to, so maybe it'll work. But I guess he'll have to wear a very, very skimpy costume for that, right? Well, yeah, of course they will, Nif. It's why the culture industry is an industry. The John Gwynn-o-matic. Well, as long as everyone is using a CX, make sure you call it CX, and everyone's socks are actually made through null binding. I guess you're on the track there. It'll work. Um, yeah, people will love it too. Just include at least one cool animal companion. That's important. Yeah, that's what I mean, Joe. I think it will already. It's probably already able. If you have, like, someone who knows how to use ChatGPT properly, give it the right prompts, and then go over it as copy editing and change and smoothing out the edges. I'm pretty sure you can already produce like a 150-page, like, self-published romance novel already. And that's like one layer of the whole, like AI discourse. The one is, like, yes, most of the stuff that we consume is very mediocre, and I say that as someone who has read 15 R.A. Salvatore Drizzt novels in their life. Yeah, sure, that stuff's mediocre and replaceable, and that's like the one fear and the one side of it. But the other part that I think is really important, kind of gets lost in a lot of this, like, hey, look, I made this funny thing with ChatGPT, and we're still safe as humans. Like, is that art is something that we as humans have, like, you know, the problem is that we want to be special. We want to be, like, kings of creation and all of that, lords of creation, or whatever you want to call it, right? We want to be boss animal. And the more science we do, the less we have that distinguishes humans from animals. And, like, creating art or being able to create art is one of the few things that is still left. It was like, even with language, right? We're pretty sure that dolphins and whales can probably communicate over long distances and stuff. We just don't know how and stuff like that. Language is getting put in question. It's getting questioned more and more now. Recently saw that they're using a machine learning and stuff now to try to actually decipher whale language, which really cool. And but see, so like AI now writing stuff that is clearly, one of the few last redoubts of human superiority, of being able to create stuff that appears to be art. Uh, that that goes like that. That cuts at the heart of what we believe makes us more than just another species, or just more animals on this planet. So it's really, really difficult for us to come to grapple with, to grips with that. So, well, what we do is we make fun of it and pretend even more superiority, which is, the same thing that, dudes that have doubts of their masculinity do when they make fun of women, and make really cheap sexist jokes. And the same thing that, white supremacists do when they make racist jokes. It's sort of like, at our hearts, we kind of know there's no difference, and we're worried about it. We fear being aware of the fact. We're frightened of it. So we make dumb jokes. And I feel a lot of the current like AI discourse with like, hey, look, I made ChatGPT write a fantasy novel and it doesn't read like Stephen Erickson. Or I tried to let ChatGPT do this or that. A lot of it goes down that same road. And the problem is that it makes it very difficult for us to actually have like a constructive discourse on how to deal with the fact that maybe we're not as special as we think. And that's a bit of a problem that I'm kind of worried about. Well, I can tell you also they probably want a lot of like meat product placements. I think that's what dogs like. I'm pretty sure. Salvatore GPT. Oh God, I really don't want to. I really don't want that. It's already bad enough with the human version of it. Yeah, Liam, I'm not quite sure. I feel like at least the weird Wolfgar SA kind of situation plotline, I don't think ChatGPT would actually produce something like that. I hope so. Although, to be fair, it's been a while since I tried to read Salvatore, and maybe he's not as bad as I think. I felt like the Cleric Quintet, while being bad, wasn't that bad, but reading the first Dark Elf trilogy, or trying to reread the first Dark Elf trilogy, very much drove home that maybe between 15 and 30 something, there did actually happen some form of growing up with me, which I guess is a good thing. I hope so. Although it also means that I'm not as easily entertained as I used to. So there's that. Or not as cheaply to be entertained. But that's generally the point. And I feel like, as much as I love Robert E. Howard, I'm pretty sure that, like, you could probably get like a Chat GPT to write you a bunch more of, the Pool and the Black Pool of the Black One, or Iron Shadows in the Moon, or whatever it's called. Is it just called Iron Shadows? You know what I mean? Those kind of weird mid-career level stories of Howard's. You could probably have Chat GPT write really quickly. I mean, or Lovecraft, because Lovecraft uses the same like 10 long words that all mean something amphibious or fish-like in weird, batrachian and stuff like that. He uses those like words, and people are, whoa, Lovecraft knows all these weird cosmic horror words. I'm like, no, he found 10 words and that's it. Yeah, well, what can I say, Jeroen? I watched the first video of those videos about R.A. Salvatore, and the great character writing in the first Dark Elf trilogy, and the wonderful action scenes. They are without par, and they're a lot of fun. And I will not take that away from anyone. Yeah, well, some people just there are objective measures there, and if you enjoy them, and have not ever read any fantasy before, I will not take anything away from you. And if you enjoy them and you're just 12 or 13, yeah, sure, I get it. But if you're a grown ass man and have read fantasy for years and years, and you think R.A. Salvatore is in any shape or form more than just really shitty product placement for D&D, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe there's no hope. Well, in a recent game, Drow that certainly were no Drows next time we talked about it, did certainly get inflamed, to put it mildly. I'm not sure if it counts as hate crimes, though. But there is, that's like the other part. There is racism with the depiction of Drow, but it's more like Orientalism than the other thing, because people focus so much on the skin color, and the skin color is a problem, definitely. But the society is so much brutal Orientalism in a lot of weird ways, that there's so much more bad stuff with Drow in D&D. It's just bad. But I can't even fault Salvatore for that, because he has to work within the framework of the D&D property at the time, and 80s D&D was, as the kids would say, problematic. I don't think you can call it fish-like hand, but you have to use words like squamous and batrachian and those kind of words. Yeah. Although Kiriath are way more like dwarves than they are like elves, aren't they? At least in my imagination, they've always been way more, or they're like techno elves, which is also pretty cool. Yeah, you're right, John. Thaco is too hard. I just like today I saw like I was on Blue Sky and I saw someone posting like how you actually find real nerds to hang out with, and it was a statement about like that everything after Thaco went downhill and Thaco was far superior to anything after that. And I'm like, yeah, right, I agree. That's how you find really cool nerds. Yeah, and there are actually good H.P. Lovecraft stories. Don't get me wrong, there are some really good ones. I feel Shadow over Innsmouth, while having some racism in it, definitely. I mean, it's Lovecraft we're talking about, does actually work really well as a story. The Call of Cthulhu is just atrocious in so many ways, and actually not even that good of a story. I personally think I do like a lot of his Dreamland stories, because they're way more psychedelic and weird, and they have the Cats of Ulthar are is definitely a fun story. Also, the cats win and just kill the evil guy and eat him, which a guy or woman, I'm not quite sure. They kill the villain gets eaten by cats. And there's obviously the long ass dream quest for unknown Kadath, which takes forever and ever and is so weird. And you wonder like how could someone like Lovecraft, who probably never took any drugs in his life, come up with something as spaced out as the dream quest for unknown Kadath? Yeah, that kind of stuff I feel is way more fun than some of his horror stories. It also has a bit more some of it has a bit more of like the dreamlike quality of someone like Arthur Machen, who I feel like the Hill of Dreams is amazing, and the Great God Pan is okay, but Machen doesn't get talked about enough in like contemporary fantasy, horror, whatever circles, which I think is a bit of a shame, because it's so often like Arthur Machen for the more weird British side of things, it just like Edgar Allan Poe for like the more American Gothic style they are so much the blueprints for what happens in later horror, especially in like the pulp style horror and like weird tales stuff, and Machen has kind of fallen to the wayside, and I feel a bit sad for him because there's some really cool stuff in Machen. Well, Dunsany's very much worth being being fanboyed over. Cool guy, cool stories. And he has this like, well, somewhat over the top romantic language, but I do like it, a lot of it. And when you see his what's it called, Gods of Pagana stuff, you can see where the whole like creating your own mythos kind of thing comes from with people like Lovecraft as well. Well, John, rest your head. You certainly deserve it. And yeah, don't get eaten by your dog. And thanks for showing up as a veteran of the tiring wars. So I was going to say something, but I lost my trail, so I'll just finish this beer and switch to a cool one. And in the meantime, you can just yell at me in chat and watch me drink. Well, so much for crowdsourcing conversation ideas. Well, Jeroen, I've just finished The Salt Roads by Nalo Hopkinson, and I really, really, really loved it. Is maybe the wrong word, but I did really appreciate what she's doing there with magical realism, uh, discourse about slavery in Haiti in her case, and but racism and sexism in mostly 19th century French colonies or France as well. Oh, Katya, you finished it, and now you're rereading parts of chapter 20 because you like the suffering, right? I have no idea when, or should I be reading Cradle? I mean, everyone is talking about it, and that usually makes it very difficult for me to actually start reading a book. The Traitor Baru Cormorant. I've heard the name. I have no idea what it is. I think the problem for me is like I read Cormorant and I have this. Oh, it's Cormorant Strike. I can't read this shit, and then don't go there. But I think that's wrong with Traitor Baru Cormorant. I've heard it before, and might be something. I have no idea what Cradle is. I know everyone loves Cradle and talks about Cradle, and they're like, yeah, there's 20 or 30 or 40 books now, and yeah, they're all so cool. And I'm like, you guys want to see me suffer, right? I just know I will hate it. Well, it's about colonization. I might really like reading it, and I feel you should definitely go and read the Salt Roads, Jimmy. I think you might actually take a lot away from it. It's really cool. Like one character is the mistress of Charles Flaubert, the French poet who wrote Des Fleurs du Mal, and he famously had a African prostitute as his mistress for a long time, and she's one of the characters in the Salt Roads, and another one is on a plantation in revolutionary Haiti. So at the time it's still Santo Domingue, and it's really dark. It's brutal. And it's very much worth it. And I want to read Book of Night Women by Marlon James next, which is set in a similar time frame, like early 19th century plantation on Jamaica in that case. And I want to see how they compare, because I've like from what I've seen with James so far, he's less on the magical realism side, more on the realism side, but dealing with the same topic on a different part of the Caribbean. Because from what I can tell, and I'm obviously not qualified to talk about this at all, there's quite the differences between Haitian and Caribbean and Jamaican culture in a lot of ways. So having that portrayed there sounds like something or trying to figure out the differences sounds like really cool. Cormorant by Seth Dickinson. I'll write it down and I'll check it out. It sounds like something I might be interested in. All right. A neurodivergent accountant. Progression. Yeah, that's the problem. It's progression fantasy. It's not progressive fantasy. And that's where you have the problem right there. Yeah. Also, that sounds like a really cool idea, because at this point, so here's the thing. I've never read any like lit RPG kind of stuff, and I'm like, people have told me about the concept. I'm like, so why the fuck would you want to read that? It's like, go play your own D&D, have fun, but why would you want to read someone else's basically JRPG campaigns? It's like, well, why would you want to do that? I just don't get it. But yeah, so I feel like the next one I really want to read is the Book of Night Women. And of course, there's some really cool stuff coming up. So I reread Monsters Regiment today because I need to do the next Discworld video, so I'll do that tomorrow. And next week on my birthday, apparently, there will be finally an audiobook version of The Refrigerator Monologues by Catherine Valente. And I was hoping for that to actually finally exist for a long time, and I can't wait for that. So that's going to be my birthday present to myself. Will be the Refrigerator Monologues. So I'm looking forward to that. And next month in July, Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle will be out, and I'm very much looking forward to that one. So there's interesting stuff coming up. Well, Jimmy, you're right there. But it's very much lit with a very small RPG at this point. Hey, how are you? How do I wait? I need to try to actually figure out how to actually pronounce your name. And now I get confused because chat is moving so fast. God, you're. How do I pronounce it? Yelize? Yelize? I have no idea. But welcome, and thanks for showing up. I've read your message about the Jethro Tull album. I have not heard the new one, the one with the sort of German, pseudo-German title, Rockflöte. I haven't heard that one yet. only a bunch of songs. The one from last year, was it last year? I did really like. Now, yeah, now we're slowly back. Hey, Jasper, Jasper, welcome. I hope you're having fun here. I have read some of his Chuck's Dino Tinglers. I think my gay Triceratops billionaire, my Triceratops billionaire craves gay ass. I've read that one and a bunch of these. So yeah, I've read some Chuck Tingle before. And Camp Damascus seems to be horror about conversion therapy. So I'm Jimmy. So yeah, I'm very much looking forward to seeing what Tingle can do with like a more serious more serious topic in a way, like writing horror instead of writing his erotica. Although I know he's written a short story, sort of like the Purge kind of a queer version of the Purge that I haven't read, like a novella or a short story that might already give you a hint of where he's going with that. But also saw that he's doing like readings and like appearances with N.K. Jemisin in New York and stuff like that. And I would love to have like a recording of that, because obviously I can't make it to New York next month. But that sounds like a conversation I would like to be a part of. So yeah, that's me and Chuck Tingle. I do appreciate what he's doing in a lot of ways. Yes, I'm aware of the Spear Cuts Through Water, and I know I have to read it, and I think I really want to read it, but then something always comes up when I have like Audible credits to spend. I'm like, I need to do this right now, and then yeah, I once again am there without Audible credits and without Spear Cuts Through Water. Chuck Wendy, so here's the thing. I remember him all the way back from when he was just writing stuff for tabletop RPGs, and I think I started following him on Twitter in 2009, and I still haven't read a single page of any of his books. So I'm not sure if I should actually change that. I will read The Spear Cuts Through Water. Look, I've been a huge Jethro Tull fan. It's something. It's probably one of my top five bands of all time, and I do actually follow what they're doing. I mean, what they're doing, it's basically the same band that did the Ian Anderson solo stuff. So yeah, of course I follow that. I just didn't have time to get to the new album yet. But I mean, I listened to like one or two songs on YouTube, and they sounded fine. I feel like the Homo Eroticus album by Ian Anderson was extremely well done, and the new Jethro Tull did not quite work as well for me. But that's like maybe personal taste, because I did just really like the whole approach of Homo Eroticus. Maybe that's like a personal thing, because the whole topic of the Homo Eroticus of the story and stuff, that just did work well for me. And I'm one of those people that actually go and look at lyrics and stuff, and are get carried away by reading lyrics of rock songs. well, when it doesn't have actors, I don't know about staff, but yeah, he's a very funny, like sort of a pop culture kind of snappy kind of way is what my impression of him, and you know, that's fun in a way. So I don't know. Just doesn't sound like something that I want to read at the moment, I guess. So yeah, I probably just go and read Marlon James one, and then I'll go and reread The Culture, because I promised to read The Culture and talk about the culture in you know, as much as possible, because I did love The Culture the first time I read it, and I wanted to talk about it for a long time. And what with the whole financial situation that I'm in at the moment, I felt like talking about a poor scarcity society felt like appropriate in my current financial situation. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about post scarcity for a while. Marlon James, the Book of Night Women will be my next read, Kadia. Because yeah, more stuff about slavery in the Caribbean sounds like something that will definitely buoy up my mood. Okay, I've never heard of Nick Harkaway, but I'm also terrible at figuring out what to read or keeping abreast of like what kind of books are new and stuff like that. I still haven't read Matt Ruff's what's it called, Destroyer of Worlds, like the sequel to Lovecraft Country. I did really like Lovecraft Country, and was really excited about it when it came out in January. And then when it finally showed up, I was like, I got no time right now. And then my mood switched completely, and it's on my phone, and I haven't even started it yet. And that's been on my phone, well, since January, not February, but still. So yeah, that's that's that. I read some of Walter Mörs, and I do appreciate what he's doing. Definitely, it's a very unique, sort of weird, fun, postmodern German thing. I have no idea how he's in translation. I can't speak for that, because I read the 13 and a half year lives of Captain Blaubeer. Is it Captain Bluebeer in a bear in English? I have no idea. And that's I did enjoy the 13 and a half year lives of Captain Bluebear. It's a really fun story, doing weird things. Walter Mörs has done a lot of fun, crazy things that people talking about his books don't know about. I mean, he draws a lot of cartoons and stuff, and his old cartoon is called The Little Arsehole, which is a really funny German animated movie that I doubt has any subtitles or anything. It's really funny. No, not blue balls, blue bear. It's a bear and he's blue. Captain Blue Balls. That sounds like Captain Blue Balls sounds like like a cartoon series for the Daily Wire or someone like that. Those like mango MGTOW guys. I don't know. No, Captain Blue Bear is a blue bear, and blue bears have 27 lives, and he writes his autobiography when he's through, well, 13 and a half of these 27 lives, and it's really funny and all over the place and weird, and does, well, crazy shit. And then he has the City of Dreaming Books, Library of Dreaming Books, whatever it's called in English. And it's a very unique, over the top, slightly cartoonish fantasy world. And from what I can tell, you gain even more when you actually when you actually read the books, because there's, well, he does his own drawings and cartoons for him, so there's a visual component that you want to do. What do you mean by like a German expressionism? You're talking about the paintings and stuff, Liam? Oh yeah, I still need to read the Sugar Frosted Nutsack. I have it on my radar, and it does exist in audio. So I am I am definitely going down that road. Katja, did you read it in German or did you read it in English? Baltimore's. Because he does do a lot of like weird German wordplay, and I'm not sure how well to translate that into how well that translates into English. But I can definitely recommend checking him out for something unique. When we're talking about all his fantasy being the same all over the place, Valtamer's very much is not the same in any form. He's got a lot of weird stuff. He also got like rescue dinosaurs, which are one of the coolest ideas ever. It's like flying dinosaurs, and their job is to rescue people. So they're just cruising in the skies, and when they see someone in mortal danger, they swoop from the skies and rescue them before they fall from like a high rock or stuff like that, which is a really cool idea for a fantasy world. Oof. Yeah, I don't know much about like German visual arts of the like early 20th century. That is unfortunately not my forte. Although I've been in museums that have a lot of that stuff hanging around. All right, in Dutch, I can see how that might actually work because I guess there's enough similarity between the languages, so a lot of the weirder, stupid like word games that he plays can probably translate fairly easily. But there's like one part in the Blue Bear book when they go to Atlantis, and Atlantis has all these different parts, and all of these are permutations, different anagrams of the word Atlantis, and he does go through all of it, and it's in. He does a lot of with like weird word repetition and wordplay and shit like that. So I don't know how well that translates in different languages. Oh yeah, sure. Go ahead. Steal the rescue dinosaurs. I just love those. That's the point with Morse. There's a lot of really wacky ideas that he just does play with. So it's interesting in that more like almost like surrealist weird approach to fantasy or writing or art in general. So I think that's worth reading him. I can't promise that anyone will really like him because it's such a unique taste, but it's certainly something new and worth checking out just on that basis. And if you don't wipe the humor, then yeah, you know that can happen to anyone. I mean, there's people who don't like Terry Pratchett, so I've heard, and that's dark. I read Quality Land. I did not. I mean, it wasn't bad, but it was a bit too on the nose, and you can tell that Mark Uwe Kling got his start and does a lot stuff as slam poetry kind of stuff. So it's more about performance. I feel it's way more about performance than being about having a sustained long form narrative. If that makes any sense. Well, the hair carpet weavers are sort of like a classic sci-fi tale, the one classic sci-fi tale that Germany has to offer from like the 60s, 70s. I think it's the 70s. So yeah, I'll go and read Consider Phlebas or reread Consider Phlebas again and see what I can take from it because a lot of people really don't like that one. Go like, oh, when you're reading the culture, start with book two. It's so much better. And my inner punk goes like, Fuck you guys. It's publication order. You start with the first one. And if people don't like it, I'll prove to them that it's actually far superior to anything after that. And I need to build my case carefully there. Yes, Kling has written several books on having the Marxist kangaroo as a roommate. The Kangaroo Chronicles, and more of those. And they're very, very popular with a lot of younger German, well, younger, now in their 20s, kind of German students that are sort of party leftists do really like the kangaroo stuff. I am unconvinced. Yeah, right, right, Liam. Start with book one, especially when people say it sucks. So I'll definitely go and do more of the culture stuff very soon and see where that takes me, because I really, really want to talk about them. And yeah, I mean, I promised it for the whole fundraiser thing, which has been going really well. And I don't know how many of you in the chat have actually donated to it, but thank you so very, very much. It does really, really mean a lot to me. And it was like, it's still not over. It's a really super weird and dark place. And digging out of that stuff is so difficult. Once you're in there, and it's asking for help, and the system doesn't make it easy to get out. It's like, yeah, and it took me a long time to just even get to the point where I was, able, but like willing, or even considering of asking for help. So doing that and having people respond the way they did just means a lot to me. So yeah, I feel that it has already helped me a lot, and I hope I can figure out the rest. So maybe next month I'll actually be able to pay off all the rest of my debts, and then we'll see how I can do afterwards. But yeah, it's not been great recently in that regard, and it has dragged on me, and certainly not made it easier to actually do work on new videos and stuff. And the whole Sanderson video is proving more challenging to me than I thought it would, in some ways. And sadly, I don't have a Marxist kangaroo to help me with all of that stuff. Here's a question for you guys. What are like the actually important books that are coming out this year that I should be looking out for? Because all of BookTube is looking out for them, because I haven't kept up with any of this. Is there anything, or should I just keep digging in whatever hole I'm digging in? Yeah, Katya, I make it more challenging on myself. Of course I do, but I do have a moose. I do have a moose, and the monkey that's riding the moose is the first stuffed animal that I ever got as a present on my first birthday by my is that godfather? Godfather is the word, right? Yeah, my godfather. He gave me that plush monkey, and yeah, now it's riding the moose. Oh yeah, Liam. Yeah, I saw you did like a review for the Book of Blades. I know you gifted me that, and I read the first story, and I did like the first story, and then it got pushed down in my Audible library, and I need to return to that one. And once it's out, once I've done that, I want to talk about it, and maybe have like some of the responsible people on, because there's something going on in that sword and sorcery community that I really, really appreciate. Coming to the whole like culture industry versus mass culture versus culture and stuff, that I feel might be interesting with that more like DIY side that the Sword and Sorcery community has going. My house sigil, the monkey moose rider. Yeah. It's basically like Benjamin Stark, but as a monkey. Wait, that was a spoiler for Dance with Dragons, I think. God, it's been ages. Yeah, the Adorno thing for Sanderson, once that's out, I'd love to have you on for like a conversation on that, Joe, to talk more on it, because I think there is a room for discussion. I just need to, and I'm really struggling with that because I want it to be really good. Oh, great! There will be like a second one. Yeah, I'd love to talk to the people once I've read the first one about the whole like process and being more like DIY and working as a community. I think that's I don't want to say it's the future, but it's certainly a way more way more anarchic approach to to producing art or producing stories in a way, and I do really like that. But yeah, coming back to the whole like video on Sanderson and then the culture industries. Like, I basically have the structure and the criticism in my head. I just need to find a way to get it out there because, see, there's like two big challenges. The first one is I want this video to actually do well or reach people and make them think. And that's a challenge. Maybe that's the wrong approach, but like I'm not making this video just to gain viewers or whatever. But I feel I want to change the world is my problem, right? Which is so much hubris, so much fucking hubris. But I want to make people think about how we approach the whole fantasy work these days, and fantasy publishing and so forth these days. I want to talk about that, and for that I need to reach more people. I need to make people actually sit up and think and understand. Unfortunately, I can't do that without also doing a bit of Marxist, or in this case, critical theory. And that means I have to explain stuff. And so I'm currently trying to figure out how to make the video work and how to, there's always that insecurity with me when I'm like, yeah, I'm making videos. And basically what I do is I sit in front of camera and I just like yell at the camera for like hours and hours and hours and do no editing or what any of that. And like a while ago, I got like a comment on like one of the Dan Simmons videos, and they were like, yeah, there's so many like noises there that you should edit out, and the snorting is, and I'm aware of the snorting things probably because I broke my nose a bunch of times because I ran into shit a lot. There's all these things. Oh, there's noises. I'm aware of these, and I'm probably hyper focusing on these elements, hyper focusing on these production values and like the sound quality, the video quality, all this weird stuff, because it's very difficult for me to actually judge that. And that I think is part of the problem, where I'm like, even if all of the stuff that I write down and create and turn into the Sanderson video, maybe no one will watch it because the audio sucks and the video sucks, and people go like, well, I won't watch anything that isn't, fucking philosophy tube level of production values, which, obviously not. But if you already struggle with like self-esteem and self-image, it's very easy to fall down that road, that hole. Slavoj Žižek of BookTube. I hope not. I need to work on the accent for that one. No, and the other part is exactly that. It's like that. While I did really enjoy making the author video and well, I don't want to say enjoy making, but I did get a lot out of making the first part of the anti-Semitism video, which is still supposed to be part one of a trilogy. So we'll see how that goes. Um, talking about like actual philosophy theory, like Adorno and De Boer and stuff like that. For some reason, maybe it's probably connected with me struggling and sort of failing my philosophy PhD and stuff like that. My actual, maybe my standards at myself and my expectations for myself are super high, and I'm just scared to actually go out there and make pronouncements on philosophy in a way that I'm not scared to make pronouncements on history. There's not that much of Zizek that I think is worth reading as books. Also, I mean, some of it, yeah. There's the, what's it called, Ideology and something from the 90s. That one, yeah. So for some reason, I'm struggling more with actually talking about philosophy than I'm struggling with talking about history. I haven't worked out why that is the case, but it's certainly something that I'm struggling with the Sanderson video. Also, boiling down Adorno's concept of culture industry into like a 5 to 10 minute video part is a bit of a challenge, to put it mildly. Yeah, I think that's the one, Nif, the sublime subject of, yeah. Why are you trying to understand Deleuze? I don't think that'll work, Joe. I don't think telling people to read the Wikipedia article on culture industry is a good idea. I mean, it's so, and the other part is that I was like, yeah, I'll do those bits, the theory bits, and then I'll do the argument bits around it, and I'll film the theory bits outside because it's cool to have like a bit of a switch of perspective and shit. And yeah, I just need to do all of that at some point and just get started. I mean, I bought the beret and I bought the wine. I even went and bought like wine glasses because obviously I didn't have wine glasses. So it'll happen. It just, and I think I'm almost ready to do the Adorno explanation part. There's such good bits in Adorno in culture industry, like the way he talks about like how a text, or in this case an artwork, is just advertisement for the commodity that is tied to it. And he's talking about songs and records, but you look at special editions of books and the way we work with that these days. Like, yeah, of course, you can take this right away. It's like, does Brandon Sanderson write a story to tell a story, or is the actual point from like the fans' perspective not to just get the most limited, special, signed, whatever edition of that specific story? And at the same point, just buying the ebook would have done it just as well. And that's sort of the kind of things that I want to dive into. But the problem is, of course, you start talking about Brandon Sanderson, everyone's like, yeah, but have you ever read his books, bro? Or someone, I would not, like when I last talked about Sanderson, someone was commenting, it's like, you wouldn't know a great book if it hit you. And I'm like, well, yeah, I did taste the Get Up with the video we did when we talked about the death of the author. I even went and bought the fucking Gitan cigarettes, which are very hard to find in this town, let me tell you. So it's going to happen, and it's going to happen very soon. I just need to actually, figure it out, how to structure it and how to make it as engaging as possible, in a way. Because See, with the author book, author video, I mostly wanted to tell people about something. This time, I just want to tell people something. I want to convince people to do something or think in a specific way. There's a message that goes beyond just, hey, let me tell you about all this cool Arthur stuff, and also, don't read fucking Bernard fucking Cornwell because he sucks. The apotheosis of citizen. I actually did did title a video on the apotheosis of the author last year, or even earlier. I know John made a video about made a thumbnail for me with Brandon Sanderson's image pasted into like an apotheosis picture from not a Sistine Chapel, but like somewhere from the Vatican. No, seriously, the whole like Bernard Cornwell thing just annoyed me so much. The whole idea that everyone was like, oh, but Warwick Chronicles are such good fantasy, such good historical novels. Like, no, they're not. They're pushing a very, very conservative, not to say reactionary, sexist, fucking anti-intellectual, racist message. And you think they're great because he describes shield walls real well. And also he has a bunch of archaeological details. But that does not in any form or lend any credence to the message of the text. But it works that way because people get, well, blinded by all these stupid aspects. And that's why historical fiction is so fucking dangerous, or can be so fucking dangerous, because people go like, well, if the stuff I can check on Wikipedia checks out, then I guess the rest must also check out. And people not getting that just pisses me off so much. That's like the fact there's so little critical reading capability in a lot of like book discourse, especially also on BookTube, just annoys me so much when people go like, yeah, but I love these characters. And I'm like, yeah, but have you actually thought about what the book says? It's like, no, because I don't want politics in my fantasy. It's like, yeah, sorry, it just really, 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 really drives me mad. Hey, man, well, fantasy thinker. That was a gender-neutral man. I hope that was apparent. Thanks for joining. Thanks for joining, and I hope you're having fun. You just came in when I was angry, so there's that. So yeah, I think that's one of those elements that I want to talk more about and work more about, and work into the whole like Brandon Sanderson discourse. The fact that, well, there's more to books than just having cool characters, and it's difficult to do that. There's a second part to the whole Sanderson project that. Jeroen, you're trying to trigger me, aren't you? I wasn't. I have no idea what Mike Book Reviews thinks about the Warlords Chronicles. I don't even know if he's read them. I know Alan loves them, and lots of people love them. And I just think, I just wish people would just be more critical about books. Critical thinking is sort of a good thing to do sometimes, and you can still enjoy books. Don't get me wrong, but I don't know. So yeah, but that's like the point. Is like I read what's Mists of Avalon, and I did not like Mists of Avalon. And there's some really insidious shit going down in Mists of Avalon, even without knowing anything about Mary Zimmer Bradley. But I think Bernard Cornwell is more insidious. Yeah, Liam, I agree. I think that's sort of part of what I'm trying to do with those Sunday school videos, where I need to work on the one on the next one. But I kind of got distracted this week with all life and stuff. Well, thanks for showing showing up, Jeroen, and I'm glad I won't have any more mic triggers here. See you later, man. Yeah, Liam, that's the point. It's like that's something I want to do with the whole like Sunday school stuff, like giving people different approaches and lenses to read fantasy, and how to then possibly criticize it, because yeah, you don't need to do like full on Marxist criticism of fantasy. That's not the point. But seeing that there's all these different layers and different like levels of of meaning that are in one specific text, and that you can and that you should actually be aware of them, or that being aware of them does actually help, or you get more out of a text. That's sort of the goal there that I'm trying to do with the Sunday school part. And the next one will be about philosophy and psychology, like questions of free will and behavior of that, and how that can be acted out in fantasy in ways that other forms of literature do not necessarily allow. Or well, they allow it as well, but they're maybe not as make it less accessible, because the alienation that fantasy gives us, right? The alienation does actually make it sometimes makes it easier to sort of sculpt out these point out these aspects of philosophy or psychology, because we don't constantly connect it to stuff that's happening in the real world, and like, oh, but he got the bus colors wrong, so I'm not focusing on the question of free will here. And I think that's something that fantasy can do in a lot of ways, and that's sort of the next part of the Sunday school project. Merlin is not selling children. Merlin is usually buying children, isn't he? Well, see, that's one of the interesting parts of the whole Mordred thing. That the idea that Mordred is actually Arthur's son and not just his nephew is an invention of a later French tradition and not part of the original stuff. And for a long time, there was, especially in Scotland, the tradition or the argument that Mordred's rebellion against Arthur was actually justified because Mordred, as a son of Morgause, who is obviously one of the sisters, well, one of the daughters of Gorlois, is sort of like the children of what's his name of Orkney, Lot of Orkney, are next of kin to Arthur because he doesn't have like kids. And that means that with all the others dead, Mordred is in fact Arthur's rightful heir. And when Arthur goes to France in that early tradition to go and beat the Lucius, Emperor of Rome, depending on what source you're looking at, that means that when Arthur decides to then give make what's his name, Constantine, or the son of Constantine from Cornwall, to make that guy his heir, he basically breaks the like actual rules of inheritance. So Mordred has a right to rebel because he was just like ignored, and Arthur just broke those rules. And that's something that the Scottish side of a lot of more literary arguments about supremacy in Great Britain all the way up to the 14th and 15th and 16th century from time to time dug up. And when James the Sixth of Scotland became James the Fifth of England, is that the numbers? I keep confusing, around the 16th century. that was actually part of the sort of like propaganda at the times to actually explain that finally, finally the Scottish or Orkney or the Northern Line finally got to its right and actually got England back as they should have gotten it all the way back when Arthur died. So the way these ideas kind of have political meaning is just so interesting to me. Sixth of Scotland, yeah. First, is it really first of England? I don't know. Yeah, a fantasy thinker. That will be the things like the top 10 most insidious authors. That should do well. That should piss people off. Let me think. Who would I put into that kind of list? Oh, Robert Jordan for sure. Bernard Cornwell, definitely. Um, I don't want to call what's his name Terry Goodkind. I would never call Terry Goodkind insidious. I think he's too blunt and on the nose for being insidious in that regard. But yeah, it's an idea. It would certainly make people hopefully entertain people and make people very angry. I'll have to think about it, but it would be fun. Because yeah, I think it's very easy to ignore that and go just the full on, oh, it's just escapism. What could possibly go wrong? It's like, yeah, but if your escapism means like going to a land of white supremacy and hardcore patriarchy, maybe there's something wrong somewhere deep down there. I mean, Tolkien is pretty bad in that regard as well, as much as I love Tolkien, right? It's like, and I do really, really love a lot of Tolkien stories, but Middle Earth is so brutally blood and soil and bloodline focused, and oh, the Numenorian blood was thin in him. And like, are you listening to what you're writing there, friend Tolkien? Well, and see, that's part of the thing that I'm going to with the whole like culture industry aspect, Liam. The idea that art and escapism, and I think it's super interesting to look at that because it's very easy from like a postmodern standpoint when you look at what Adorno goes for, right? And it's easy to paint him as this snob who just likes really elitist modernist art, which he doesn't. I mean, he personally does probably enjoy a lot of it, but that's not the point. It's it's very much about the fact that products of the culture industry are supposed to just give you enough energy and entertainment to go back to the machine and go working next day, and that's all their purpose, and they'll do that whatever way they do, providing you with the dreams you need to go back and work for the system, so the bourgeoisie up there can just enjoy their high art, which they can't fully enjoy because as soon as they actually would listen to high art's messages, they would have to dismantle the system. And that's like one of those, like Adorno is so good with like imagery from time, in this case Adorno and Horkheimer, and they use the image of Odysseus and the passage past the rocks of the Sirens, when Odysseus does stopper his rowers' ears with wax, and they tie him to the mast, and they're sailing past the rock of the Sirens, and the rowers down there they don't get to experience the song of the Sirens because they have to row. And Odysseus gets to enjoy the song of the sirens, but he can only contemplate it. He cannot act on it because he's tied to the mast. So he can't actually do the thing that would actually give him the relief that the song of the sirens promises. And that's a very powerful image for like how the bourgeoisie and the proletariat are tied together in that, and how art kind of comes into that. It's like he gets to see the promise of art, but he can't act on it. He's tied because he's tied to the same system, that being the boat in this case. And I think that's a very, very, very interesting, very powerful image to make that argument about how art and products of the culture industry connect to each other and how both fulfill a function that at the end of the day leaves both sides enslaved, because being part of the bourgeoisie at the end of the day may be more enjoyable, but it's certainly not perfect, is the point. Wow. No, I did not see that, Liam, but holy shit. That's 6 million for a Frazetta painting. That's a lot. I mean, I'm glad that someone like Frazetta gets that kind of recognition by now, which wasn't always the case. So I'm very glad for that. Wow, holy shit, 6 million. That's a lot of money, especially when you're considering how not exactly excessively rich Frazetta was at the end of his life. Right, Joe? Well, Frazetta has always been the fantasy painter, in so like the influence that Frazetta has had on fantasy aesthetic and fantasy perception over the decades of the last 50 years really is impressive. How much of his Frazetta paintings ended up being like record covers for rock music albums that then fed back into this were the kind of music that people that were writing fantasy afterwards were listening to and stuff like that. The way that Frazetta has impacted fantasy is probably the most any like visual artist has ever done. Possibly followed by Michael Whelan is what I would say. And it's interesting to see that those are not the typical like Tolkien painters that anyone is talking about. But they had so much impact on like how fantasy evolved over the like 80s and 90s. Which, yeah, that's pretty cool. Wasn't the Death Dealer on that first Dust record as well? I think. Sarah Frazetta, is she doing the same kind of style that Frank was going for, or is it a different style? Because I mean, Frank Frazetta's style is fairly, distinct. I remember we had this like one like tabletop role-playing game, like gaming store, like a bunch of Warhammer stuff, but mostly like old tabletop stuff, and they closed down in like 2012 or something. And they had stuff back from the 90s, and they had like a Frank Frazetta Conan calendar from the year 1994. It was just like lying around somewhere, shrink wrapped in in a corner for like still with like the original at the time, still like pre-Euro Deutsche Mark price on it, because no one bought it back then, and they just like kept it around. And I was like, You know what? I wish I would. I wish I would have bought it because we could just like frame the pictures. There was a bunch of like Conan prints, and that was cool. Should have done so because I probably could have got it for like, I don't know, $3 or $4. Yeah, that's what I mean. Also, like the image of fantasy, like yeah, it's on the Dust cover, which is that Dust album. If you haven't heard it, um, great band, Dust. They have two albums from the like early '70s. One is called Dust. I keep forgetting what the other one is called. Um, but you can get them on like a compilation with both of them nowadays, and they're brilliant albums. Most people don't know that one of the guys then went on to become the drummer for the Ramones. It's brilliant stuff, and they, yeah, it's like a mascot for like an army unit. Yeah, that's why Frazetta is such an important part of like how fantasy evolved. But Elric is more Whelan than Frazetta. Also, like it was like Conan is Frazetta, and the typical Elric paintings, the covers, at least for the paperback reissues, have all been Michael Whelan, which ended up on so many like Sirath Ungol band shirts that I own. Which is why I would definitely call the Michael Whelan the second most influential fantasy painter, because once again he's done so much artwork, and yeah, artwork that has been outside of just outside of fantasy novels. Now that's an interesting question. What other subjects outside of like Arthurian fantasy? Do you mean other like legends, myths, or whatever, or do you mean just general like ideas for larger videos? Because I mean, I do have the whole like Sanderson culture industry video, which will be the next one, and then there's definitely the video that I want to make, like part two of the of the fantasy and anti-Semitism project, which will be looking at the connection between like Herder's views on connection between environment, language, legends, and a national character, so to speak. How that influenced the Romantics, both in Germany and in England, and how that kind of stuff dribbled into fantasy through Tolkien and others, and how you connect that with the ideas, and it also influenced people like Freud, but Freud very little, but Jung very much, and how you have like Jung's influence then also coming back into fantasy through, well, Jung directly, and also through people like Joseph Campbell, and how that is sort of like how ideologies that are very problematic, very nationalistic, if not also distinctly anti-Semitic, because obviously with Herder having that connection with like a homeland and all of these things in like a national character, it does automatically exclude or denigrate people that are well, that don't have like an actual homeland at the time that Herder is writing, which includes both Jews and Sinti and Romani people at the time. And you have these elements. You have like levels of anti-Semitism in say people like Jung and so forth. So I want to look at how these ideologies influence fantasy versus just plain stereotypes, which is what I did in the first video. And that's going to be the second part. And I already did some reading, well, actually a lot of reading on it. I just need to actually, parse it out and actually structure it in a way. Other myths. I'm not a linguist, so I will not talk about guttural stops in fantasy. It's just annoying, but then again, I listen to audiobooks, so I don't have to suffer through that. It's the poor narrators who have to. See, Joe, I feel somewhat reluctant to talk about like visual arts. Yeah, Romani depictions in fantasy. That's an interesting topic. I just haven't read a lot about Romani history. I don't know anything about it. I would have to dig into that. Yeah, me talking about visual art just feels a bit weird. Yeah, as for the Romani, the memorial in Berlin for the Sinti and Romani victims of the Holocaust is, in my opinion, the most emotionally touching of the memorials that Berlin has. And that's saying a lot, but that one, holy shit, that one is touching. Just saying, should you ever visit Berlin, that one is very, very emotionally touching. Yeah, fantasy names. There's like a wonderful, like weird, wonderful XKCD comic on like the quality of a fantasy novel versus the number of invented words and names, and it's really funny. It's just like one of those graphs that go exactly the way you imagine them to go, and yeah, they're so true in almost all of the cases. But yeah, I mean, I thought about the whole artwork stuff. I obviously do. It's once again, it's like a blind person giving a talk on like the influence of visual art on fantasy just feels weird. Although maybe I should do it and just actually put on like those like really like blind people style sunglasses and just lean into it. Maybe that will work. Completely like constantly misplacing my beer and knocking it over and talking about the quality of the artworks. I think like, and that's like one of those things that I so appreciate about like Black Company is that Glenn Cook does not give into that whole idea of weird fantasy names, which is so very, very much a problem of people constantly copying Tolkien. It's like, yeah, it's not proper fantasy if I didn't invent at least one language, even though I have no idea how languages work. I'll just come up with something really dumb. And as long as some syllables will repeat, it'll probably sound like a proper language. No, why not just give it like proper names? I mean, who cares? And the same with like fantasy, invented languages in fantasy. Robert Jordan, whom I have opinions on, one of the most ridiculously stupid, nonsensical bullshit decisions in Wheel of Time, and there's a lot of them, is the idea of the old tongue, right? So Matt is speaking the old tongue, and so you invented a fantasy language that is fucking gibberish. And you have him spout full paragraphs, only to then give us the full translation underneath, because of course you do, because you have to, because we don't speak your invented language. Now you could go and just do, the John Wynne road of just putting Icelandic in there and claiming it like the magic language, which works for most people, although I do understand enough, Norwegian and stuff like that to go like, Yeah, I don't know, man. But it works. And it would have been cool if he would just have used, I don't know, Latin or something for like his old language. I know it's probably supposed to be closer to what people speak right now because it's so far in the future and shit like that. But having an invented language and having full paragraphs in an invented language that you then have to actually put in like translation underneath it is just bad. Oh God, Liam, that's bad. Yeah, that's the point, Liam. And that's like the one part that people don't understand in like the epic poo thing, that essay that Michael Moorcock was like. Michael Moorcock is like, yeah, look, I don't agree with Tolkien, but at least he knows what he's doing. But people copying now, no shit, and that's the problem. Yes, I agree. Glenn Cook's naming conventions are fantastic. Actually, yeah, I did that once for like so. My partner at the time was studying art history, and I had taken some classes, some courses in aesthetics. So I know a lot. I did know a bit about art history and meaning and stuff like that. And they were doing like a visit to like a museum in Frankfurt that has a lot of art. Like it was an art museum because of course it was art history class. And I was just joining them because I had nothing to do. I was like, hey, it's a weekend trip. I'll just come with them. And and then I ended up taking over so much of the tour through that museum, explaining stuff about different paintings and different schools of painting and the approaches to creating visual art in the Middle Ages versus creating art in the early modern ages and stuff like that. And it was like, well, you're the blind guy. How can you explain art to us? It's like, look, I don't have to actually see it to explain you the thoughts behind it. The theory is the theory. Even painters did write down stuff from time to time. I feel like, yeah, like going with like normal names is one of those like strengths that yeah, Glenn Cook does have, and his approach to nicknames is just brilliant. Terry Pratchett does do something of the same sort once you get out of the first book. Although the glottal stop names in the Wurmberg episode are clearly a parody of one specific fantasy series at the time, so it makes sense. But beyond that, he goes for the same thing. Like, why not name your Smith, Smith or whatever? It's like, look, you'll do that in your brain anyway. Well, I don't know anything about Native American language. You could probably gotten away with just using one of them. That was like an interesting aspect that I found. So I recently read Catherine Hume's what's it called? Metamorphoses. The use of mythology in fantasy since 1960. Yeah, there's that. That like at least for magic characters, for magic, that having using your real name is gives power. That's certainly a part of Black Company. Art history is such a fascinating subject, and I wish more people would actually go for it and look at it because there's so much in there. And now I get distracted. I was going to say something else, and let me backtrack. Do I see the comment? Oh yeah, the native language. So I read the Catherine Hume book, Metamorphoses and something myth and fantasy since 1960. And it's a good book. It's really interesting. It didn't convince me as much, or it left me less satisfied than Brian Atbury's stories about stories. But that's a personal thing, I feel, and probably a result of having read too many of those books at this point. Well, one thing she talked about was fantasy books, or more like magical realism books. Well, she's talking about books with that deal with mythology, obviously, written by different Native American authors, and how the fact that for parts of the Native American community, these myths are still like part of life. There is this idea that you don't want to share specific aspects of those myths because they're sacred. They're part of your spiritual beliefs and religion and rites and so forth. So you don't actually put them in writing. So you change them and so forth. And that for an outsider, it is impossible to understand to know how much of the depiction of certain beliefs of Native American characters in these books are actually the truth, and how much of it is, in fact, has been changed to avoid, giving away ritual secrets and parts of the culture that has been, plundered by colonizers forever and ever. And that's just something I found very interesting, and that's something I just thought about when you talked about making up your own Native American languages versus just using some that are out there. Covering the Middle Ages in about a week. Yeah. Some people take their entire life to study just the Book of Kells, and here's all of medieval art history in 2 weeks. Yeah, and see that's what I find interesting also. That, like, on the one hand, yeah, that's the approach, and I 100% agree with that. But that because the non-tribal readers, and in some cases just from the tribe of the authors, some that non-tribal readers are aware, if they think about it, are aware of the fact that, at least if they read up, are aware of the fact that they will never know which parts are actually accurate or not. That being aware of the fact that they cannot find out, that actually adds a layer to that specific depiction of myth and rite and ritual, that can only work because of that very specific weird historical situation that you find yourself in those, with those specific authors and so forth. That's something I found very fascinating to think about, from like being aware of the fact that you cannot know which parts are invented and which parts are not, because there's no way to find out for you. Holy shit. But like, so it's funny from the outside, but like, the fucking goal to actually goes like, oh, you look native, you look ethnic, could you please perform an exorcism? It's like, fucking hell. Like the unawareness, like the lack of awareness of how that can, how that feels, is just insane. Well, it works. It worked out for Wicca. It certainly did. And let's not even start talking about fucking true. Oh, by the way, Liam, have you read the Hammer and the Cross by Harrison and Tom Shippey? Like, I still want to read the Hammer and the Cross because it sounds like something I might find interesting, especially since yeah, Tom Shippey does know his old English, to put it mildly. See, that's the point. It's like I feel like Tom Shippey writing or helping write historical fiction might work out really well. I do love Harry Harrison's stainless steel rat stories a lot, although they have aged so badly in so many ways. And I feel like those two, working together sounds like something that could be really, really cool. And Shippey has a really good essay in one of the Arthurian companions that I read for the author video, where he very much talks about like the post-colonial aspect of Arthur that you can see so much of in the historical fiction versions of Arthurian retellings. Because yeah, I mean, he's got the historical background to explain that kind of stuff. So him tackling that subject sounds like something I might be interested in, or something I might appreciate. See, Shippey is great because he knows how to write academic papers. Like he's a good academic, but he's also a good writer. He's a very convincing writer, and he's a writer. He's not afraid to take actual stances. In like, I don't want to say moral stances, but close to moral stances in his academic work, and that's something I really appreciate. But yeah, back to like possibly legends and historical like stories that I might want to tackle in the similar way to the author video. I don't have the audio copy of The Hammer and the Cross, but I know it's on Audible, so I know I can get it. I checked it. Well, Shippy is tap dancing on toes. I'm all there for it. Oh, you've had like conversation with Shippy? That's really cool. So like, but to not actually leave that question unanswered, like, say, I don't know, like I feel there's so many people that have talked about like Greek mythology and stuff like that, so I'm not quite sure I want to do that. I mean, there's a lot there, and I've certainly read a lot of it. I don't know whether I really want to go down that specific road. Now, it would be interesting to have like to actually do the very German thing and actually look at the fucking Bolsinger saga and Nibelungenlied and Richard Wagner and the whole mess. And I'm not sure I really want to do that. I mean, I actually did actually see like watch whatever, listen to whatever you want to call it, the entire like a performance of the entirety of Wagner's Ring of the Nibelungs. So I have been to an opera house. I've seen all four parts: Rheingold, Götterdämmerung, that's the last one of Siegfried, and whatever Valkyrie. That's it's like Rheingold's the prologue, and then it's uh, Valkyrie, Siegfried, and Götterdämmerung. That's the order. I did go to all of these operas, and so I could probably do the Volsinger thing. I'm just not sure I really want to go down that road because it would add so much, doing so much stuff on like Norse mythology. I always feel like, I don't know. I have not read the William Morris version, like Intro to the Volsungs. I mean, didn't he like actually translate the whole thing as well? I think so. Here's the problem. Like I feel like the other like different myths would actually really profit from that. With Greek mythology, it's a bit difficult because you have so many different ones, and you can't just go, "This is Greek mythology 101." I mean, Alan from Library of Alexandria did start that, and I think he stopped after Theseus Part 2, if he ever did Theseus Part 2. Or he's just like being shadow banned from my recommendations by YouTube, which is fine because I disagreed with his other stuff. Anyway, yeah, there's a chapter on William Morris in the Andrew Vaughan, the Vikings and the Victorians. I just haven't gotten around to reading that book yet, but there's an actual part on Morris and his connections and how he did his translations. But yeah, so Greek mythology is kind of difficult. I feel like doing the Volsungs plus the German Nibelungenlied and the Wagner and doing the whole thing might work. It would certainly take a while. I would need to have that spark of inspiration. I didn't. I mean, I kind of stumbled into the Arthur thing by accident because of the guy Gabriel K stuff, and I'm like, hey, let's look at Arthur, and then that trap door opened, and I just got swallowed by Arthuriana for like 3 months, and when I kind of dug my clawed my way out of that tar pit of Arthurian legends, and I don't know, 2,000-3,000 pages read of Arthurian literature, I was like, yeah, well, I'm still somewhere out there trying to recover from that, but like I feel like the Volsungs, because of the Wagner connection, might be a very interesting aspect because you can show the very specific uses it has been put to. Robin Hood, yeah, because then I can actually talk about The Hood by Labitida, which is such a brilliant book. See, that's the thing. Like Morris shows up in the Arthuriana stuff as well because he's one of the people of the Pre-Raphaelites that are, well, not hired or asked to paint. Is it a hall in Oxford with images of Arthuriana? And he does paint. Morris has painted a bunch of images of different Arthurian characters, mostly Guinevere and Nimue and some of the ladies, I think. Oh yeah, of course you want to read The Hood. So have you read By Force Alone by now? Yeah, you have, right? It's both of those are absolutely brilliant, and I feel Robin Hood. I don't know if Robin Hood might work. There's a bit less there than with Arthur. What works is that there's so much like nationalist politics and stuff like that behind it, and Robin Hood, while being also popular and being one of those characters that has like meaning beyond just being being Robin Hood, there's still, I don't know, I don't think he's as malleable as Arthur is at this point, or like in a way that people don't necessarily know enough. It's like people know when you say Robin Hood, people are like, "Oh, right, shoots arrows, steals from the rich, gives to the poor." Oh, nice. Thomas the Rhymer sounds good. Yeah. Yes, they are what he calls the antimatter of Britain, and you should. I think it is better to read by force alone first. Yeah, I saw your video on Pierce Plowman, and yeah, it might be the first reference. So with Lavitidar's The Hood, a lot of the reference is for like his point is about like property rights and property yeah, the property rights in England and how that has shaped British society, English society in a lot of ways. Because yeah, owning property in England is extremely difficult, and so much of like participation in society is tied to property ownership. How that has that's sort of like his main point in The Hood. Like the thing with Greek mythology is like, yes, a lot of people have done Greek mythology, but most of the videos on Greek mythology I've seen have been very, very much like, oh, I'll just retell you the story. And it's like, there's a lot more to be done there. See, I could probably do one on Theseus that might be interesting. Because what makes Theseus so interesting is that you can see a similar thing as with the Arthurian stories, right? When you look at like the oldest resources we have for Theseus, it's a very much just the bull thing, and then you add all kinds of elements are added to that. And for example, the whole like his whole like way to Athens, with finding the Procrustes and the different robbers that he kills on the way. That whole stuff is added later, and it's added at a time where we know that Heracles, as a Peloponnesian hero, because Heracles is a Peloponnesian hero, becomes more and more powerful, or more and more popular, and the Ionians around Athens are like, well, we need one of those heroes of our own. So they take Theseus, who has been around for a while, and suddenly he has this whole quest when he has to find his father, and on his way he has to do all these like different I don't want to say Herculean labors, but they're very much exactly that. So they're doing like basically copying Heracles in that regard. And then you look at it later and you have situations where once Athens becomes a democracy, well, a democracy in the classical Athenian sense of democracy. Suddenly, the very much child raping Heracles competitor is no longer what actually works. So you have people like, I think it's Sophocles. It might be. It's not Aeschylus. It's I think it's Sophocles. I might be confusing it. He writes a tragedy called Oedipus at Kolonos, and that's supposedly about Oedipus coming to a holy place in Kolonos and begging for sanctuary there. And if you know anything about sanctuary laws in Greek mythology, Greek law, in classical Greek law, that's a bit of a deal. But he's also Oedipus, and everyone knows what he's done, so he's also like a damned man. And the question is like how you solve that. And what happens there is that that Theseus, as king of Athens, goes like, yeah, well, in my country, in my city, I may be the king, but I let the people decide, because it's the will of the people that actually counts. So because Athens has become a democracy, their local hero, Theseus, has to be, democratized in a way, and suddenly fulfill a different function. So it's very interesting to see how Theseus changes over time. Problem is, I have no idea how many Theseus retellings we have nowadays. I don't think Madeline Miller has written one on him yet, because all he does is usually be an absolute asshole to women of below the age of consent, to put it mildly. So there's no possibility for any queer love story in like a Theseus retelling. So I don't think there's a Madeline Miller retelling. And without that, no one else will start doing retellings. So I guess I'm not sure if there's much in like modern retellings for Theseus to do, but that's one specific myth that might be interesting to look at. Or Orestes might Orestes and Eurydice might be a different one, or just Troy or whatever you want to do. But yeah, classic Greek myths are just very, very. There's so much to be done there. Yeah, but well, that's the point. Of course, it's Athenian propaganda. All of it is. Hey, Sana. Yeah, I know, right? The hood is brilliant. Plus, the whole fucking Heart of Darkness part, man. turning Guy of Gisborne hunting for Robin Hood into a full-on Heart of Darkness pastiche is just like that's a stroke of genius. Well, see you around, Joe, and thanks for showing up. I love it, man. That was great. How can a Viking wreck Minoan civilization, Liam? Oh yeah, that one. That I remember that one, Liam. The Gene Wolfe one. I love that one because it does basically also have like a submarine war story in it, and I mean it's Gene Wolfe doing weird Gene Wolfe things. And I don't. Is it? Yeah, it's Claw. It's still Claw. But yeah, Claw of the Conciliator does have some amazing stories in there. It also has like the weird Jungle Book retelling, which also maybe has like a Moses story element in it. um, so grip of the Minotaur. I feel like the grip of the Minotaur sounds so much like one of these monster erotica novels that are out there. to bring it back to Chuck Tingle, there's like I know that, and you don't want to know why, but there's certainly a story called Mounted by the Minotaur, and Grip of the Minotaur does not sound so different. Although it might just be a bit more masturbational, I guess. But yeah, maybe I should have a look at the Grip of the Minotaur. I feel like a book that I really should reread because I already made a video about it and stuff like that, but I really want to reread Waking the Moon by Elizabeth Hand. Because like after reading Triumph of the Moon by Ronald Hutton, and after reading Myths of Avalon and reading Margaret Murray, I mean the only one I haven't read is Gimbutas yet, but I feel like I would get so much more out of it. But then I feel like, well, I shouldn't make another video about a book that I've already talked about. But maybe I'll just reread it for my own satisfaction. Mia, if you haven't read Waking the Moon by Elizabeth Hand, you should definitely go and read it. Ah, okay, that makes sense. If it's that old, Liam, that. You definitely need to like. What I appreciate so much about all the Elizabeth Hand stories I've read so far is she's got an incredible sense of place and time. Like whether it's late 60s, early 70s weird folk, acid folk scene in England, or weird like late 70s, early 80s hippie or after hippie weird art school people or post punk or whatever. Like her sense of time is incredible, and the other stuff that she adds into that is also great. So yeah, brilliant writer, absolutely fantastic. Another one of those authors that, like, I don't know, like no one talks about for some reason, and I'm like, why? She's been around forever. She's won awards and everything, and people just don't seem to read them, read her. This, and in a way, that's the same thing for like Nalo Hopkinson, right? That was like, now that I read The Salt Roads and really, really appreciated it, it's like, yeah, why, why isn't anyone on like social media talking about her? I mean, I know Angela from Literary Science Alliance did talk about the Midnight Robber, and I'm definitely going to read that one very soon. Oh yeah, right. You told me, Ori, that she has the new Hill House sequel. If there's anyone I can sort of imagine actually getting, a sequel to Horror on Hill House actually to work, it's probably Elizabeth Hand, because, as I said, like her sense of like atmosphere and place and time is just incredible. Yeah, it's true, Liam. Like, there's so many authors no one talks about, and yeah, hard to actually understand why. I mean, hard to understand on a less than just surface cynical level. She also has like a hand had like a book last year, something something set in Hawaii, and I keep forgetting what something something road, I think it's called. I haven't read that one yet, but I certainly want to. Well, Yanni Wertz does get a lot of attention at the moment, but yeah, she also was one of those authors that have been forgotten forever. Although, like, I don't know how many, like, did Johnny Wirtz ever win any awards and stuff like that? Because Elizabeth Hand won like a bunch of awards and shit like that. No, who goes, but like the yeah, the ones that actually are awarded by like a jury and not just popularity contests. Yeah, Hokulua wrote. That's the one. Yeah, I can totally see them nerding. Like, that's what I mean. Like, Hand, I don't even know how much fucking research she does for her books, but it must be a ton, because yeah, she gets it so right. Lynn Abbey. See, that's one that I don't know. Oh, nice. That sounds really cool. 9th of July, I assume. Yeah, but from what I can tell, like, she's very open to talk to people and very happy that people are finally talking with her and talking to her since like last year. Since I think it's mostly AP who actually dragged her into the light again. Yeah, I really would love to talk to Nicola Griffith. After I read Spear and I read So Lucky, which is brilliant. I want to read Hild and Mennewood first, and then I'll try to actually get up my 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 courage enough to actually message her and ask her if she wants to actually talk about it, because I'd love to. But I want to read those two first, and well, Mennewood is coming out in October. Ah, okay. Now I know who you mean. Because obviously I know Thieves World, but yeah, names. Yeah, say I would love to read Wars of Light and Shadow. They're not available in audio, so I'm somewhat stumped. And while I read tons and tons of like academic stuff just with like text to speech, I ooh, Dark Sun, the best forgotten D&D setting out there, because cannibal halflings, and that's not the half of it. Yeah, I want to read Amanat. I want to read more of her stuff. Sadly, it's once again like an audiobook issue. Maybe I'll just find ways to pirate some of them, or yeah, we'll see. But yeah, I feel like there's a lot to be talked about there that I would love to talk with Nicola about, and we we'll see. See, I mean, Julian, you said that you read like one of like Lindholm's early stories in like Sword and Sorcery stories, and I really want to read Wizard of the Pigeons. I think that one sounds like something I'd love to read. But once again, it's so difficult to get a hold of Wizard of the Pigeon. But it's more like a magical realism kind of urban fantasy kind of thing. But it very much sounds like something I would really, really love. Well, you don't have to tell me about Seal Moore, Liam. I've been telling people about it as well, but you know, yeah. Well, as I said, I'm really looking forward for like next week when hopefully finally the refrigerator monologues by Catherine Valente come out, because I've been looking forward to that one. I feel like Oso might really love that one too. Um, it's a very superhero, a feminist take on superhero issues, or comic book issues and fictional issues. But I feel like Oso might really love that one when we're talking about female writers. Um, I mean, there's so much good stuff out there. I just yeah, I said I feel like I would love to talk to Nicola Griffith about both the disability stuff and the medieval stuff, because yeah, I get it. There's like one scene in So Lucky that is insanely powerful. When she talks about her first experience at like after the diagnosis at an airport, um, and and people are just like putting you in like in a wheelchair to get you through like security and all of that stuff to the gate at an airport, and being completely turned into like an object in a very different way than what we usually mean when we say objectified. But it's exactly that thing that has happened to me. Is like, you know, I go to take a flight to somewhere, and they'll bring me a wheelchair because disability means wheelchair. Whether you need one or not doesn't matter, and you just like get packed in and just like driven through the entire thing, and it is so dehumanizing. And having that experience, put into words by someone who really knows how to use words, it felt dark, but it also felt extremely powerful. Joanna Russ, I haven't heard of her. Well, I don't know. I feel like I'm running out of ideas and stuff. Well, it's also like we've been doing this for like 2.5 hours. So in case you have any last thoughts and ideas and questions, please let me know. Because otherwise I'll just slowly wind this down. Because I'm also running out of beer. And we don't want that, right? Yeah, we've been doing this like for like, yeah, I know time flies, also. Yeah, well, thanks for actually showing up, Liam. I very much appreciate it. Same for you also, and like everyone else. Obviously, also the people that maybe watched and did not actually feel like writing in the chat and being yelled at and whatnot. I very much appreciate that as well. So thanks everyone for actually showing up again. And I'll try next time. I'll try to have like a guest on. We'll see. I need to figure out stuff. We'll see how that goes, and we can talk about something cool and not just me just inventing stuff and rambling and shit. Because I figured like I owe you some entertainment. Which is, I'm not the most entertaining person, I guess. All right. And with those words, I'll slowly leave the place. And yeah, once again, like have a great weekend, have a great Sunday, and I'll see you probably tomorrow with a video on Monsters Regiment, and on Monday with the weekly navel gazing, and I'll try to get off my ass and do the big one. And yeah, thanks once again for actually showing up, and I'll see you very soon. And until then, cheers.